It's live. It's live now.
Yeah.
I've got my toy direct from Oddball Smuggling Shop in Camden.
Did you like Oddballs?
That's good. All sorted now.
Hope you've all had a good Christmas. Alex cooked my Christmas dinner this time.
Oh, blimey.
Without having the family. It's just a lonesome Christmas.
Oh.
Oh.
Oh, get the violins out. I've got a special T-shirt on here.
Yeah, Mum's wearing the EJC 93 T-shirt.
Oh, wow, check that out.
Not that one.
I'm sure everyone else will be able to see it in a few minutes. We are. It's 2 minutes 40 until we begin the interview.
No,
is that a cup of tea you've got?
That is a cup of tea. I'm drinking a green tea, mango and lychee.
Wow.
Ooh.
I like a bit of fruity green tea.
It's always a good thing. And what hat have you got on there?
I have got, I'm sad to say it's not an original Nils. It's
But
very terrible that we're talking about visual components when no one can see anything we're doing at this moment.
But you know, Nils blessed that hat before he passed away. He said, Alex, there's a really big stories with the Nils Pole hat, but he said, Alex, I really want you to make this hat and sell it because Nils never made any money.
I wish it was Alex's. I wish it was Alex's hat. It's a Chinese cat.
Oh, look, you've got a cat.
Oh,
it's as far as I'm aware, I bought this from a certain company that we're all closely linked to, and they're now not sourced from Alex anymore. I don't believe.
I think I know where they're from. Then.
Yeah, exactly that.
The name we won't mention.
Yes, yeah, exactly that.
Begins with a P and ends with an E.
Yeah, a little bit of intrigue for the.
That's the story. That's the story I won't tell. Actually, it's not a very nice story with that guy. Anyway.
Yeah, definitely.
Now you're going to leave everyone in suspense.
They'll be wondering the entire interview. What were they?
What begins with P and ends with E?
Yeah.
Just take away the P and then you probably got his name.
So it'll be E by gum.
Less than a minute now. Less than a minute.
Yeah.
Oh, the anticipation is growing.
Have you done your intro yet?
No, of course I haven't done my intro. That's when we're all on screen and everyone can see us.
Oh.
Can we move
right now?
This
is merely the landing for it, so we can have everyone come in, join in the room. They don't miss too much. Obviously, a bit of jibber jabber from us, yeah, exactly. And then in 20 seconds when we go live, then they get the whole experience.
7, 6.
Your counting's off.
3.
I've got the main screen. I've got 15.
Well, it's gone to 0 here.
Oh wow, it did go to 0. That was quick. That was far before I realized. I suppose we should start, everybody.
15, 14.
Yeah, thank you for that. So, hello, everybody. Welcome to Whining On. My name is Matthew Bowden, the Incorrigible Rogue, and today we have Susi Oddball and we have a special guest interviewer, Melvin Ortwag. How you doing, everybody? Lovely to see you. Susi, it's Alex that's with you, right?
Alex Oddball is with me. Yes. Yes.
Is that one of your prodigies? One of your brood?
Well, I think he's now teaching me things. So the circle goes around, basically.
Yeah.
And I was going to start. I
just wanted to ask one question. Was he one of the ones who was juggled when he was a baby?
Yeah, I was.
Yes.
I was one who got dropped.
Only a couple of times.
Well, there was quite a few occasions when Alex was in my stomach while I was juggling as well.
I think Glastonbury was one of them, wasn't it?
Well, I was in the shop as well, juggling bouncing balls. And there's a classic picture where I was quite heavily pregnant
I've got that
with
picture.
Alex. And I'm bouncing juggling balls in the shop. And I'm sure babies can sense it, even when they're in their mother's tummies.
It's one of the Oddballs original packaging from back in the day. And there's actually in our old shop in Pitford Street. And this is one of the original packaging with Dad there as well. No, with our second or third juggling shop, wasn't it?
And what year is that?
Street. Yeah, it's our third.
Yeah.
Fourth one, actually.
Fourth one.
Yeah. I was going to start, because we've already done part one, and we did a build up of how I met Max. I was just going to remind people how I did meet Max. He was juggling upstairs. Well, he was juggling downstairs with a guy called Bill, Bill and Taryn were both Canadian, and they had a juggling troupe. And they used to travel the world, but they were living upstairs to me in Hackney. And one day I was looking out the window one evening, and the lamppost light and the juggling clubs caught my eye. And I was really entranced with the juggling pattern that they were doing across, with the lamplight sort of shining on the juggling clubs. And it totally entranced me. So I decided to ask Pete, who lived upstairs. I said, do you mind because it was quite noisy upstairs, and I realised why. He said, do you mind if I complain about the noise? So the first time I met Max was when he opened the door, standing on one leg with 3 balls in his hand, and he was turning them around in this strange way and looking like Jethro Tull, really. And I sort of said, excuse me, I'm from downstairs, and you're making an awful lot of noise. Can you tell me what you're doing? And of course he went, juggling. And learning unicycle in the spare room. So there you go. And after that, I started to learn myself, and I had to warn my neighbour downstairs. And I had loads of cushions, massive big floor cushions, so that every time I dropped, the thump wouldn't be so hard.
So basically, Oddballs were started through a noise complaint, right?
Yeah. In Hackney, like they do. And so, then Max went away with the troupe, Bill and Taryn, and they went off to Switzerland. They used to go to Geneva to juggle. And meanwhile, I'd got the juggling bug. I was a teacher, but I'd got the juggling bug. And from that time onwards, you couldn't stop me. There wasn't as many workshops, although I'd say there isn't as many workshops now as there was in the height of the juggling era. But there was. Would you say
that would be the mid-90s?
Yes, yeah. It wasn't mid-90s. It's 83, 84.
84 is when we established.
Yeah. 84 is when we had our shop, our first shop.
So we're talking about 82, 80.
And when we had some unofficial shops in our flats. So
what I mean by that is the height of the juggling scene when you had
no, that was in the 80s. I'd say 88 when we had the big circus festival, and we also had the first juggling convention as well. So I think the height of juggling was around that time onwards for at least 4 years.
And do you think that was kind of coupled in with the free party scene and people who were going out clubbing and energizing themselves in multiple different ways and juggling through the night? And did that feed in with that?
I think later on it did, yeah. I think that the juggling era was down to the media loving juggling for what it was in those days, to relieve stress and stuff. I remember doing 94 interviews on the radio about how juggling relieves stress. And I remember doing half as many TV appearances just about juggling relieving stress. I think that it was a period when there was a change of the government that we're in probably caused quite a lot of stress. There was a lot of strikes and strife going on.
I was going to ask, is that because
Yeah.
of it? Because of all the joblessness and the turmoil and the
Yeah.
changing of state within the country from sensibly a more socialist structure into a more pure neoliberal capitalistic kind of structure?
Yes. And also there was a lot of cutbacks. I know that as a teacher because there's a lot of cutbacks in education.
But mum and dad lived in a lot of squats, right? And there were a lot of parties going on as well. So there was linked into that party scene and freedom, wasn't it?
There was always parties all my teenage life upwards. Back in the late 60s onwards, there were always parties of some sort or other and artistic things going on. But I think that juggling came into its own in the 70s, the mid 70s. And I remember Beaconshaw Festival back in 1972 when the Grateful Dead were playing and Captain Beefheart and all those people. There was also the Karamazov brothers doing juggling, as fronting the Grateful Dead. So it started in that era. And people like Original Mixture were starting to do juggling clubs, to teach juggling. And there was a lot more interest in juggling. So that's when it started. But when when myself and Max got together, Max had already been juggling for a few years around the world with juggling trips. And he also was quite well known in his own right. And there was the first juggling convention in Brighton.
The EJC.
BJC.
EJC in Brighton.
EJC was, yeah. Because I remember Tim Batt saying that Max, with his fire juggling, set off the sprinklers. That was quite fun. Anyway, that's when the kind of juggling started for us, for me personally. But Max had already been juggling, and I had encountered jugglers when I was a child, but never ever conceived that I would ever juggle myself.
Well, we talked about this in the last interview, didn't we? The idea that juggling was something that was done in circuses and wasn't really something for the lay person to do.
Yeah. So
I remember a story that used to say that the Russians got very offended with the idea of them selling juggling equipment because it was like trade secrets and family secrets. So they said, why would you sell that? And mum and dad always said it gave so much joy and it'll actually make juggling a lot bigger. By selling juggling equipment, it won't make it smaller, it'll make it even a bigger thing for more people to love. And they were right, obviously. But the Russians got very offended, right?
I think I was in a mime workshop or a circus workshop way back when, and these two weirdos came in with their suitcase full of juggling balls. Yeah,
we used to do that. We used to go to all the workshops.
But we changed our name to Oddballs instead of Weirdos. It's just quite similar. But...
No,
after a brief period of weird balls.
Yeah.
I think Oddballs for the UK. It doesn't mean that you're going to be committed into an institution, but it does mean that you are weird in some way or another.
Weird and wonderful.
But yes, you're definitely right, Melvin. We had suitcases and we used to sell all our juggling equipment in suitcases because that was the same time as we had unofficial shops in our flats. So in my bedroom, for instance, Max actually built a wooden bed, so that our bed was high up, so we could have a little cabinet and all sorts of things for all the equipment. So when people came around, they didn't realise it was our bedroom. They thought it was a juggling room to sell equipment. But sometimes I'd be on top of that, hiding under the covers. Especially if it was 2 o'clock in the morning and I had to go and teach the next day. So, once we had 20 clowns come from Italy, and that was 2 o'clock in the morning. So that's when we decided, we had to change things. But before we did that, we had lots of thoughts about teaching juggling. Because when we used to go around with our suitcases, people used to say, well, okay, we've got the equipment, now we want to learn. And of course, that's when we started to teach, and we used to do week courses, and we used to have a regular workshop. We had one at Jubilee Hall, which was up at Blackfriars, Colombo Street, sorry. And Jubilee Hall was before that one. And we took over from Tim Batt, really, because he had one in the studio, Pineapple Studio, which is where I learned to pass clubs. After Max and Bill and Taryn had gone to Geneva, I went to Tim Batt's workshop and learned how to pass clubs, and it was amazing. And I was just thinking earlier on, reflecting about women jugglers, and it was the first time really that I'd encountered almost, it wasn't equal in male and female in the workshop, but it felt more equal, the fact that females could juggle as well as males. And I think that's a really important thing. It was accessible to females and males. And even the passing, although I was quite shy about asking about passing, it took me a long while. But yeah.
I remember you talked about that in the last interview, about being approached in the end and saying, do you want to have a go? You're going to have a go this time.
Yeah.
I think that the last time we stopped off of the interview, you were changing shops in Oddballs. Am I correct in remembering that? Was it Canonbury Street you went to? Have I misremembered?
But we were in Islington Park Street.
Yeah.
And before that, we were in Upper Street, but no one really knew of us at that time, because that's when we used to go around with suitcases to let people know where we were. And we shared the shop with a wooden toy shop. And then we went to, and that was in Upper Street. Then we went to Islington Park Street, and we sold magic and juggling and all sorts of things for quite a few years there. And we also, just before that, we were in a shop. No, we were living upstairs to the shop, the wooden toy shop, in pretty squalid conditions. So all that had to change. So when we got the shop, we moved to South Tottenham. But our shop was in Islington. So we ran it from there.
And was there a feeling of change then when you moved out of the shop and you moved to a nicer place? Did you feel like the dynamic changed a bit? You're business people, now you've made it.
It did change a lot.
I think what Dad always said, it wasn't really about caring about business too much, just so much, but just enjoying what he did. But it turned out that people really, really loved buying juggling equipment, and he had a lot of joy out of it, as well as Mum, right? So it kind of became an animal in its own and just kind of took away. Because like Dad always said, he wasn't really interested in becoming a businessman. He just wanted to meet people that had like-minded thoughts and wanted to juggle. And it became, that was so popular that he had to run with it and then became a businessman.
And
so was there almost a bit of friction between that, becoming something you didn't necessarily want to be, and then having to feed the beast that you've grown?
Well, Dad always said as well, you had to do performances, right? The way they funded the business is doing the performances and doing the shows. So at some point, you had to stop doing the shows and performances. But that took a while, right?
Well, it takes at least 2 years in our business. It took 2 years before we started to even think of making any sort of difference to our income. Our income was solely shows and supporting the shop in that way for about 2 years. And that was like 2 shows a day, 3 shows a day, and the weekend as well.
So why run the shop then? If you enjoyed doing the shows and all the money's coming from the shows, why bother doing the shop?
There wasn't any juggling equipment. It was really hard to get. So that's what Dad always said. And Mum always said it just wasn't easy to get juggling equipment. So they wanted a place where you could actually buy juggling equipment.
And not in our home, because we had young children. That's what changed. We started having children in the family, and we needed to support the family as well, but we needed to make it safe for the family. So the shop hours were the best ways to keep it safe.
Dad always said
it was a retail shop at that point.
And Dad always said he really enjoyed, because when he was younger, he found social interaction very hard. And when he started to juggle, it was the first time he felt in his life that he succeeded. So for him, doing the shows was really brilliant. But then he realised it was quite forced. He controlled the shows, and he wanted to be...
For Max, it wasn't forced for me.
But for Dad. And then he went into the shop and he realised he could have the same conversation again and again. And he slowly got better and better at the conversations. And it was easy. It was a subject that he really cared about. So then he felt a more natural way of becoming more social. So that's what Dad. Mum's always been very good at talking to people, and found that in performance and into the shops as well.
But in the beginning, I was doing all the books, the finance books, in half terms and stuff like that, because I was still teaching as well. And, any business, it takes a little while to sort of set up and run and to try and make some sort of profit, at least, so that you can buy more equipment. So that changed.
Maybe it's good to talk a little bit about you, rather than the shop and the business, about you and performing, because you performed all over the place.
Yeah.
I think I remember mention of you going to Russia and performing.
Yeah, I'll just say this. When I was working as a teacher, I was also performing in festivals, not only with Max, but with other people as well. And I was doing things. And when me and Max got married, on our wedding day, we had to rush down from Essex down to Jackson's Lane so that I could be a mummy. But not, and I was pregnant, but this was a mummy with bandages. So I was always doing bits of performing as well. And that was on our wedding night. So I don't think many people have had those kind of wedding nights. But it was fun. And a lot of our friends and family were there, and jugglers, that we knew at Jackson's Lane. And they still go there. And it's a mime festival now at this point. And Nola Ray was one of the early people I knew from Jackson's Lane. So, yeah.
Mum hasn't stopped performing, though. She still performs pretty much weekly. She's still doing shows, like, all different degrees, right?
But, yeah, but the thing is, though, in those days, I did more shows with Max. And we used to go to Frankie Anderson's classes. And I remember Frankie saying to me and Max, well, you guys have got chemistry. And all we were doing was trying to mime driving a car, yeah. But what Frankie, I don't think, realised is that what we were miming was actually reality as well. It was like that when we went to gigs, And if I took the wrong turning because I gave the wrong direction, we'd have a wonderful little scene. But so we went all over. We went to schools. We went to theatres, and we not only performed, but we taught juggling. Everywhere we went, we taught juggling. One of my things was I wanted to teach the world to juggle in my idealistic state. And Max was very good at teaching juggling.
Why did you want to teach the world to juggle?
Because I feel that juggling actually opens up your mind in a different way and perspective. And I think it, for some people, not when you first start maybe, but it helps you to relax. It helps you to focus on other things besides all your bills and problems. I remember being quoted once, I called it active meditation, and I stick to that. And I think if there was more jugglers in the world, I think we'd have more peace as well.
Yeah.
Well, you can't hold a gun when you're keeping 3 balls in the air.
No, you can't, no. So we went all over, not just UK, we went abroad, we went to Europe a lot.
Someone asked me to ask you a question about Georgia.
Oh, yeah. Okay, well, that's organised by Haggis and Haggis and crew, I say. Haggis MacLeod and crew. And Georgia was the most amazing experience. It was the first Russian-Georgian juggling convention. And it was at the same time as there was about to be a civil war, well, not civil, but a war between Tbilisi and Russia. So when we were in Berlin, we decided to go, and there was 80 jugglers from all over the world.
What year is this, before we go on?
I believe this was, correct me if I'm wrong, anyone who's listening out there, but I believe it was it was 1991, because I remember Haggis making a joke about me and Max, because when we were in Berlin, we were warned about the Civil War and that they might kick off while we were over in Russia, in Moscow and then Tbilisi in Georgia. And Haggis warned us, and he said, anyone who doesn't want to go, snuck out now. And we all wanted to go because we were all connected with an organisation called Jugglers for Peace. And there's a whole big story behind that. So we got to Moscow, and we all, before we got there, we had a big jumbo plane, and it must have been the first time they had so many passers passing on a plane and given permission to do that.
There's a picture out there as well of all of them passing on a plane.
You were juggling on the plane?
Yeah.
I've never seen anyone juggle so much on a plane like that. And that was on the way there. So we got off at Moscow. We were told it's going to be cold, and it was. And we went to Red Square at 3:00 in the morning. And we weren't supposed to juggle there, but we all did. And they couldn't stop 80 jugglers juggling. So they just left us juggle. And then we had to get the flight to Tbilisi, where it was really warm in Georgia. And then we were assigned families. And Haggis says, and this is why I remember it's 1991, Haggis said, right, Susie and Max, you're in separate accommodation. We don't want you breeding like rabbits. And that was our third child. That was going to be Lucy, who I nearly called Georgia because I conceived in Georgia. And, of course, that was a joke, and we did stay in the same accommodation. And I'm sure that their walnuts helped towards giving me conception.
It was somebody's nuts.
No, I grew them out in the street. Okay, so we had a beautiful time in Georgia, but we kept on getting whisked away by the family. So we were in the middle of performances in their big circus buildings. They had beautiful circus buildings with jugglers like Hamlet, who juggled like 9. Well, I've never seen it at the time.
Serious famous
An American juggler who juggled with his feet on a piano whilst juggling, ball bouncing. Amazing. Just Cindy Marvel, of course, my beautiful lady performer. I met a few lady performers out there, but Cindy's the one, obviously, I connected to. She was very young, but she was just the most talented woman juggler, from America. And I'm still in contact with her, and she's talented in other ways as well now. So she's really come on. But so there was a lot of women. Oh, and of course, Micah, who was the lady from Holland who did beautiful Diablo. And loads of other jugglers, Ken Fakir, who is Dr. Ken now, and many, many, many different people. There's 80 jugglers. So I won't name 80.
What was the sense there? Was there a sense of worry about the fact that war could break out at any moment? Were people nervous?
I'll tell you a little story, because our family used to take us by car and whisk us away. So we didn't do all the performances. Sometimes we'd be missing, and they'd take us to the mountains, and we'd have a little bit of time with them, singing Beatles songs and things. But one time we were there one day, and Dr. Ken went out to busk. And it was getting more and more tense towards, the political side. And there was big faction. There was 2 factions, political factions, and they were against each other. And they'd have these big meetings in the town square. And Dr. Ken went to juggle, and he got attacked by 3 old ladies who thought that he wasn't taking the political side seriously enough. And they were hitting him with umbrellas. And he came back looking rather hurt. But all we said was, well, do you blame them? They're in the middle of a war, they're about to have a war. And
how interesting that the expression of conflict there was not what I was expecting. I thought you'd talk about military walking through the street. You're talking about citizens. 3 old ladies caught up in this tension and the emotion of what's going on, and striking someone who seems to be completely counter to the sense and environment of what's going on at the time, completely dislocated from it.
But the interesting thing, Matt, is while all this was going on, all the political parties were having parties. They weren't just a political party, there were political parties going on to attract more people to those political parties, to get them on different sides. And there was also lots of performances going on by people like ourselves, entertainers, that were absolutely jam-packed full, so that people could forget things too.
Is that bread and circus, you think?
Pardon?
That bread and circus.
Yes, to relieve the tension as well, because it was incredibly tense, I know that our family had 2 boys that were going to be joining the army because of that, and I don't know about the girls. I presume they were as well. So it was all really intense, and scary. There was a whole underlying of tension there, although we really, really enjoyed it. And there was a lot of stuff like there wasn't enough food in the shops and clothes and things.
And did you feel that as guests? Were you given quite small portions of food?
No,
did you feel no?
We were all treated like kings and queens. They really, really loved what we were doing and appreciated what we were doing and treated us. I know there were some people that probably had a little bit of harder time than we did. Myself and Max, we had a great family, and we were treated really well. And most people were. The only thing that I would say is that if there was any antisocial behaviour, it was put down very quickly, and it didn't matter if you're a guest to the country or not. You would really be dealt with.
And that's to stop it spiraling out of control.
Yeah.
When it's tense, you have to squash things straight away, I assume. Did any of you guys at the time feel bad about the idea that you were being treated so well and there's people, normal people on the street really, really struggling? Was that something that was floating around the groups?
But it's interesting because I was quite young, and I saw peasants for the first time, what we call peasants. I'd seen poverty and I'd experienced poverty, but not in the way that I experienced it in Russia, in Georgia especially. It was quite noticeable, put it like that. There was a big distinguishing between people who had money and people who didn't. Cars were also, few and far between. So the cars that were there were used, as a status symbol as well.
And what kind of impression did that make on you at the time?
For me, it made me appreciate how I was being treated by the family, especially. But it also made me realise how lucky I know we say that we're not lucky with all the cuts and stuff going on. You think, but actually the people in the country, especially the poorer people, had a lot more that they lost a lot more than we did. We thought we were hungry. We didn't really know hunger like they did, and the hard times that they had. And they did have a lot of hard times. And I know that during the war, it was tough as well for all the people. So we were lucky that we went, our timing was quite weird. It was really literally when we went out, the circus, when we went back to Britain and America and all the places we'd come from, the circus buildings were literally taken over for the military straight away and never to be replaced back into circus buildings again. Changed, and that whole market's changed now.
Well, it's so strange. It's almost as if the clowns are walking out, the machine guns are walking in through the other door.
It would be an interesting picture, actually, if someone wanted to draw a picture of that. And I know there's been there's coverage online. I know Cindy Marvel used to write for a newspaper, Times newspaper, and I think she wrote an article about Georgia, which is worth reading if you get a chance to read it. And she does mention that me and Max went missing.
Well, I heard about this. You were accosted of some kind. There was a story Haggis asked me to ask you.
It was the family. They kept on taking us away and driving us away. And they
when
wouldn't
you
take
say
no
the family,
for
I didn't ask. Well, who is the family? Are they the people you're staying with?
Yes.
Ah, okay. Because I heard the word kidnapped brought into it.
Well, they virtually did, because we were supposed to do performances and we'd rehearse all the performances, and they'd take us away, and they took us away for 3 days once. Sometimes it was only for an afternoon, but this particular time it's for 3 days. It was very beautiful where they took us, and it was very wild,
panicking?
Yeah, they magicked.
So they didn't know where you were.
No, we didn't panic because they're a lovely family. The only thing I panicked,
not you, but the people who are managing you and managing the event. Did they know where you were?
I think that eventually somebody was told, but they were very casual about it. I think it took them a couple of days to realise, that we weren't coming back for another day at least. it was. If you can imagine the whole family sort of enjoying, well, I would love it. I would have loved them to come to England, and I would have done the same for them, and I would have kidnapped them and taken them to all the beautiful places that we have as well, which is what they did with us.
When you left, did it really change the way you thought about your life and the world? It sounds like it's an experience that could do that. Yeah,
in two ways, actually. Number one, because I left pregnant, which I didn't know at the time, but about a month later I did. But what really did change for me was the caliber of performances that I saw. The jugglers that were out there performing, and meeting the Russian jugglers, because there was Russian, and see, that was the strangest bit. It was a Russian-Georgian convention, and yet they were about to be at war with each other. But the jugglers were not like that with each other. They weren't like that, and and I feel for people that don't want wars like that, And it was beautiful to meet these people. And we looked at the clubs and things, and that gives you ideas, the different types of clubs that they had, totally handmade,
Well, just recently I've got some Russian customers, and I was talking to them about what's going on, and it's quite crazy, because there is a lot of amazing people in Russia, jugglers, and Ukraine and all around the world. But that's what juggling symbolizes for me. It's the connecting together. And so I just want to say that, I had this big political debate of not wanting to fund Russia, but I want there to be more jugglers and juggling happening in war zones and stuff. So for me, it's a recent conversation I had last week with a load of Russian jugglers and how much they don't want the war to happen. Obviously, it's out of their control, but it is happening, and they're going to juggle to celebrate, life and expression. And that's what juggling does. And even now in Russia, it's just happening.
And that was interesting because there's been wars all the way through Oddball's been in existence. And we've had mail order. We started off mail order. And there was a big discussion between myself and Max as to whether we were going to supply people in the army with juggling equipment. And in the end, what we did was we did supply them, but we also sent literature and badges, jugglers for peace badges.
That's what I've done with the Russian order. We've got juggling for peace T-shirts, and that's what I've sent with the Russian order. It's interesting enough.
Which you did not even know about.
No, I didn't know. It's just
it's funny how when you're talking, like we're doing now, and things come out that even your son doesn't even know. It
happens on a daily for me.
So when we came back from Georgia, we'd already done the circus festival here in London. We'd already moved.
Hang on, what was the circus festival in London?
Right, the circus festival in London was the London Festival. It was the London Festival of New Circus on the 29th of July to the 14th of August with Adrian Evans and Tina Glover. And it was in 1988, that one. And that's when I said to you, Matt, that's when I think that juggling changed. There was circuses from all over the globe there, Chinese, Russians, English circuses, and many, many English different circus groups doing workshops, all sorts of things, creative play and performances, of course. And there was
is that pre-Zippo? Zippo wasn't started by then.
No, Zippo had already just started. So did Jerry Cottle. Both of them had started, but they were quite new. Yeah. But all of those circuses came to the London Circus Festival. Yeah.
Was New Circus part of this as well, or was this more?
It was the London Festival. It was called the London Festival of New Circus.
Ah, okay, there you go. So would you have people like R Chaos and what would become Circus?
R Chaos was there. Shenyang Circus, the Russian State Circus. There was Zippo Circus wasn't there, but there was I can't remember which. It was quite a big circus. There was a few lots and lots of circus groups.
Can you set the scene? When you walked into the place, what did it look like?
Okay, I've got a little description here, and it says a massive colour, light and image. The village hummed with activity. And in the daytime, there's performances by the cream of Europe's street performers and magicians. An amazing array of trapeze, jugglers, acrobats, clowns, fire eaters and magicians. And also there was a chance to watch trapeze artists and professionals practicing their skills and to hang on a trapeze yourself. And I won a raffle to do that. And I'm really scared of heights, and I got stuck up there, and it took them a long time to get me down. And there's also a chance to learn to juggle and ride unicycles and stilts. And Sue Mitchell from the ILEA, because that was integral. London was actually financed a lot by the London County Council and then ILEA, which is the London Education Authority. Full-time, Belfast Community Circus, and there was loads of other circuses as well. All right.
Yeah, really good time.
And that's where I met Big Chris.
So before we go on to
he will appear later on in my story.
Before you went to the circus event, it sounds like it was a rather big thing. How did you feel about it before you were going to it? What was your expectation of it before it happened?
Well, we'd already been selling from suitcases and in our shop for 4 years. Yeah, and we'd been teaching, we'd been performing. And we've not only been performing in Covent Garden, but we performed in theatre and play centre, all sorts of places, yeah. Places, even in palaces as well, and hotels and whatever. So when we got to the London Festival, we were a bit nervous because we were meeting a lot of people, big-named people from different parts of the world. And we had our little humble stall. And we were selling juggling equipment from our humble stall, as well as doing workshops there and performing.
And shows as well.
Yeah, we
so
did.
Did you have a bit of imposter syndrome, maybe?
There are other companies there. Is that what you mean? What do you mean by imposter syndrome?
Imposter syndrome is an idea that you are not valid in what you do, that everyone else is good and you're terrible, that you're an imposter, that you're faking having the right to take the place that you take in your life.
We had that a while before. We got told off by the old circus people for teaching juggling, and that actually influenced the way we taught juggling as well. And also we tried to encourage people to go and see juggling at circuses. And so we had a bit of an imposter syndrome there. But what was really funny here, I remember one of the Shangyang circus, little Chinese ladies, we had some of the Chinese iron balls. The shuzing, they're called, shuzing balls, and they're for meditation. Balls, right? You ring a high note and you ring a low note. And there's this little girl from the circus, the Chinese circus, whose eyes were bigger and her excitement was bigger than her eyes even. And she went and she ran and she took a ball and she ran away with it. And then Max was chasing her. That was so funny. I think we let her keep it in the end.
There was a lot of people at that convention, right? There was 1,000 people through the door each day.
Oh, no, that was a different convention.
No, that was the second one. How many people was the second one?
No, the first British Juggling Convention was also in 1988 as well.
Oh, okay, same, yeah.
And, do you want to tell you about that one?
Yeah,
the first BJC.
The first BJC, British Juggling Convention. That was interesting because all we wanted to do was we had a lot of workshops going at that point, and we wanted to introduce people to each other. So we started off by planning to introduce people to each other. So we had it in Colombo Street, which is in Blackfriars. And what we needed a lot of jugglers to come. So we ended up inviting a lot of jugglers, but we also ended up getting all our people from all over the world come in as well. And we ended up with we counted, we did door counts at the door. We ended up with 1,000 people coming every day.
And that was 3 days.
And it was a 3-day festival. But what was integral for me about that festival, and I still am fascinated by this, is we did a whole series of workshops there, and you can see it online. And there was all sorts of people from Covent Garden, street entertainers, mainly doing a lot of the workshops, teaching people different skills. And the skills that they taught were things like presentation, how to present a show. And on that list was people like Andre, Brian, Paul Morocco, Doug, and Sham. And also for rope spinning and tightrope, Brian Andros and Nick Andros. There was ball bouncing, cigar boxes and devil sticks, Tony Anthony, who we don't hear about very much now. Advanced club passing, Charlie, Haggis and Sam. So Charlie and Haggis were from Bath and Sam was from Bradford. Okay, he was an amazing juggler from Bradford. And then balancing and also spinning plates and all sorts of ping pong balls was Steve Rawlings. Yeah. And number juggling was Sean Gandini. 5 or more, it says. Patterns in passing, no fit state circus. It's just amazing. It goes on. And then free ball workshops was Matt. Unicycling workshops was Pedro from Spain, who was a vegan and did all the food that we produced in the convention was a vegan food. We did get a lot of complaints from people who ate meat as well. So we said, just go outside and buy some if you want some. And it was all whole food as well, which was amazing. And then Simon Beaumont, learning to juggle. And there was also a demonstration in Diablo, which was Stuart Fells, who was also a stuntman. And it just went on, the whole list. All the different people from our workshops and all the different people from Covent Garden and circuses all over came to help at that convention. And it was the most amazing show as well.
That reads as a who's who of modern variety. Really, you know. What was the vibe like there?
It was brilliant.
What was the year?
1988.
Were the professionals kind of separate from the public? Was there a 2-tier thing?
No, apart from the fact that the professionals were teaching. They were teaching and sharing their skills, which is what New Circus was about. It was, in those days, it was about sharing your skills and, you know, teaching people to go out there and enjoy it. You know, that's what Tina Glover was about, you know. She was an early one doing workshops to do that and encouraging people and paying people to go and do the workshops. It was integral that you had alternative arts and people like that to actually pay people for their skills and you know, to pass it on. And No Fit State did the same. And, you know, it was just amazing because people shared so much, you know, and that's just juggling. We don't even, you know, I do clowning and we're not even talking about that. And there was so many sharing of clowning as well and performing the mime as well, you know, and that still goes on. So, yeah, it was a beautiful atmosphere. And we had a telethon as well that year. And we ran from Covent Garden to Canary Wharf. And the fundraiser was for Wales. And instead of it going through a third party, it went direct to the people that were building the wells. They were called Green Deserts charity.
Building wells, yeah?
Wells, yeah, to help clean water supplies. Yeah, it was just, and that's what used to happen in those days. It was, you'd have an idea and you were able to do it. You don't have all the barriers that you have now.
Thing has changed a lot, hasn't it? Because
yes.
I mean, I've only seen 2 instances in the last few years. One was in Brighton in the park, where a whole bunch of jugglers were meeting up once a week. And the other thing is a spinning group that runs in Haringey.
Spinning out.
That Matt and I visited, where everybody was really friendly, and you know, I had someone come up and said, "Do you want some help?" And I, yes, please. So, has there been there seems to have been a big change from when you were doing that to now?
Well, yes, in some ways, although I think some people, there are things, I've just been looking at some of my notes. And in 1989, when I had this young man here, I was actually performing in Glastonbury Festival. And I had to have a doctor down at Glastonbury because I only had 5 days due date. So I could have had my baby in Glastonbury, but we wasn't sure or not. So me and Matt hired a caravan and took us down. We'd already got Simon there and Chris. And Dr. Stephen Glasgow from Cardiff was my doctor when I was there. And he's connected with the No Fit State Circus. That's how I first met him. And that was he became my doctor in exchange for me teaching him juggling 5 balls. So that was our deal. And that particular year, it rained, it bucketed down on the Thursday night. And when some of the bands played on the open air stage, and by Friday morning, the site was a veritable sea of mud. And the quote for Michael Evers was philosophical, because a lot of punters packed up and went home because it was really bad. And he said, "We've had the mud bath and proved we can still cope with the conditions." And it says he quoth damply. So it was actually quite bad conditions, but I didn't have my baby until 4 days later.
Unfortunately.
But since then, and the festival was the solstice day, that, you know, that era was the solstice. It was a week earlier than it normally was. So, you know, it was interesting because Alex could have been born in Glastonbury.
But Merv, the London workshop you went to is called Spinning Out, right?
Yeah, it might be.
Spinning Out, still running now, and the Brighton's called it's Hoop Clock and Fire Gathering. That happens in Preston Park on Tuesday, and that's still running as well now as well.
There's something else that happened in 1989. Would you like to hear about this? It involved 100 jugglers.
Go ahead.
We were phoned up to provide 100 jugglers for a film shoot, okay? And so it was with Derek Jarman, and the film was called The Garden, okay?
Yeah.
So we met up, Derek Jarman, myself and Big Chris met up, and we invited as many jugglers as we could, and it turned out to be 100. And it was for his dream sequence. And when we got there, we were all told to choose a costume, whatever costume we wanted from his box. So I became a Viking lady. My sister Kathy chose a belly dancer costume because she was juggling scarves. And Big Chris was Father Christmas. And he later got a job at Hamleys and Harrods as Father Christmas. But many of the Colombo Street jugglers were on the set. And we were invited to a film party after. And unfortunately, by that time, Derek Jarman had passed away. But I know that he really loved the dream sequence because he told me. And he would have kept it in had he not passed away. But there is footage. So if anyone can get hold of footage, there's still footage of that 100 jugglers dream sequence. So if you can find it, please let me know. And then in 1990, I got given Frankie Anderson's clown class. I'd already been doing the juggling class at the City Lit. So all those, which was interesting, because to meet Derek Jarman was an honour for me. And to be on a film set, like it was a big film set in South London on the warehouses at the time, was just an incredible experience. And I do have some original pictures, so maybe one day I should put them in an album and show people as well, because there's still some of the jugglers, you know, in their costumes in there. as a woman, it was really interesting for me to start organising things because although I was with Big Chris, I was the one who was organising most of the things. But when we used to do gigs, people used to go up to Big Chris first as the man and ask what was happening. And sometimes I used to just watch and listen just to see what, and then sometimes I had to go, oh, by the way, we have to do this and that and the other, and then start to get a bit dominant, you know, so that I could actually get what the idea was.
How did that make you feel?
I felt quite undermined. I felt, you know, if you've got your ideas and then someone goes to someone else, you know, they're interested in your idea, but they go to somebody else and say, well, you know, this is a great idea. Tell us more about it. And they totally ignore you. It's not a nice feeling. It's not a nice feeling. Of course not. And it happened quite a lot, you know, especially to women, I think.
You mentioned to me, Susie, you were pregnant and a TV set and how you got pushed aside.
Yes. I'd done several programs before that, TV programs, but because I wasn't showing, I think maybe it's because they're a different TV station, but they didn't worry. But there was one particular children's program, Saturday morning children's program, where they actually said to me, oh, well, you can be behind the scenes and come to dinner with Max, but you can't be on the set. We can't show someone so heavily pregnant on the set. And so I actually worked and taught kids behind the scenes so that when they came on, they could do a little bit of juggling and stuff. And Max was actually performing, and I wasn't allowed to perform because of my big bump, which happened to be a baby. And I always thought that was really unfair because it's a children's program. I was having a child.
What children's program was it?
It was somewhere, I can't remember the children's program, but it was down southwest, a station down southwest. But then on another time, I was pregnant with Lovejoy, doing Lovejoy. And I said to them, my attitude, it was a week after this one, I got phoned up. No, I was pregnant on this particular Lovejoy one. And I said, I presume you want to hide me. And they said, why did you say that? And I said, well, because the last TV program I did when I was pregnant, they wanted to hide my bum. And they went, no. So I think it depended on an attitude, you know. And I was really pleased with Lovejoy for not, you know, I went in a clown costume anyway. I did have to have an understudy in case I was very close to having a baby again, another baby. And I could have had the baby while I was filming. So I said, well, if you put me in my clown costume, the person can take over in my clown costume if necessary. But we had to organise quite a few jugglers and juggle with a fire scene about 3 o'clock in the morning in Brighton. I wasn't living there at the time, ironically, like I am now. But I was a little bit worried because they put us up in a hotel and they're offering a massage. And I knew that if they massaged my shoulders, I might actually have the baby then. So I had to say decline, you know, the massage. But yeah, we've had all sorts of experiences with the TV. I had quite a bad experience. Would you want to hear about that?
No, right.
I will do it because I think it's important for people to know this, that you have your successes, but you also have hard times. And this one was a popular live program involving, I'm not going to say the name, but it involving quite a big celebrity who had Frank Bruno on his show as well at one point. So it was a Saturday night live. And unfortunately, my partner the night before the show couldn't come. So I had to find someone else to do it with me. I did try to snuck out and they wouldn't let me. But all through the Saturday before the show, they were trying to get me to teach this lady to pass clubs on a unicycle, and I couldn't. So I got her to bring her walking globe, and we were supposed to be dressed up as nuns juggling, because originally my partner was going to be on a tall unicycle juggling as a nun, to me on a smaller unicycle juggling and passing clubs as a nun. But this poor little lady who jumped in couldn't really do that. So what I said to her, I said, look, if the club gets dropped, jump down from the walking globe, because you can easily jump up again, because that was her skill. And she was so nervous throughout the whole thing, because we were treated quite badly that day. She just froze on the walking globe, and I had to get off, and it didn't look good. It really didn't.
Well, it's that old adage, isn't it? Don't spook the talent.
Yeah, but the top celebrity wouldn't even talk to me. I had to talk through the researcher. Everything I said had to be done through a researcher. Anyway, I got phoned up. That was a really bad experience. I was going to give up juggling then. And then and I was on my own by this time.
But before you go on, you say you were going to give up juggling. Was it that because of how bad that experience was? Because you did so much juggling.
It was a really bad experience. I got flagged on the show live. You know, it was horrible. The agent didn't want to know anything, you know. It was horrible.
But the interesting thing about this is there's so many different facets of performance that you did. You performed in festivals, on the street, you were teaching, and yet this one bad experience in this one particular avenue of what you do was so visceral, it sounds like, and impacted on you so much, you were thinking and considering giving up everything, all of it, the whole shebang. Just interesting the way we respond to things.
It was one of the biggest TV shows at the time, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Was it a bit like a residential party, you might say?
What's a residential party? It sounds like a mental home.
No, I got the reference.
What does it mean? No. Okay. Oh, yeah. Sorry. Yeah. Okay, I got it now. Anyway, after that experience, and I was going to say to you, I don't think this is to do with women. I think it's to do with losing confidence after something like that. And I think that you feel like a failure because people make you feel like that. And it's very hard to get back up and do something, you know. And I don't know, I think it's not different for men than women, to be quite honest. And I don't know whether we would have been treated any differently if we'd have been blokes. I'd like other blokes and other people to tell me what their experiences are on that, because I'm not sure.
I think the interesting thing with this is that I think every performer can relate to that moment. And it's such a counterintuitive and unlogical, and that's not the right word, illogical situation that your mind goes into, where you do a really bad show and everything goes wrong and you sit there and think, God, I can't do this.
Yeah.
Obviously, I was rolling sixes for the last 12 years, just being lucky. And in fact, now the truth has come out, I can't do this. And it's nonsense, but that's where your mind goes, doesn't it?
Yes. And I don't know why it does it, but what happened to me, the reason why I carried on was because a week later I got phoned up by the BBC Design Awards, and the lady researcher on the phone, I explained to her why I couldn't do the TV, because I promised myself I wouldn't do anymore. And I told her exactly what happened. And she said, look, Susie, she said, we won't treat you like that. We will not treat you like that. You can choose what you want to do and what you think will work on the TV using those utensils, which was a knife, a fork and a spoon. And you do it your way, and we'd love you to do it, which I thought, wow. And it was scary, but I took the plunge and I did it. And I'm pleased. Pardon?
Did it work out?
It's fine. It was fine. And that was the silly thing, you know, you have all these worries and stuff. And it was fine. And also because, you know, I did try on this other show. I did try to get them to change what we were actually juggling.
You tried to use your knowledge and experience
yes,
to
but I wasn't
ameliorate the situation.
Yeah, but I wasn't allowed to. But in this one, she gave me the confidence, and I thank her so much. And she became a political researcher as well for political programs later. And I think she was still in TV for a long, long, long time after that. And I'm really pleased. And I wonder, she was a woman who was an understanding woman. And I think her sensitivity, and as a woman performer and having had that experience, I thank her for her sensitivity. Brilliant.
Do you think there might have been some form of bravado, maybe, if there was like, oh, come on, it'll be all right, get back on the horse, that kind of more macho approach wouldn't have worked, wouldn't have made you feel safe?
No, it would have made me feel worse, because it would have made me feel like they weren't sensitive.
Yeah, and they were essentially telling you to be stronger, not they'll be more sensitive. Yeah.
And as well as I do in performing, that sometimes you're given a critique of what you're going to be doing, and you go there and it's totally different. Yeah. And you have to prepare for all sorts of situations. So, and she was obviously knowing that, I was really nervous about this because of what happened. And she allowed me to do what I wanted to do, which I'm really pleased about.
But she also must have had a lot of faith in you, because other person
I don't know how
might
she
have
got hold of it.
Yeah, or why she was in a situation where she wanted you to do it and she was willing to support you in it. She could have just moved on to the next person, and she obviously chose not to do that.
Yes, yeah. Anyway, after that, I was still doing lots of shows. I was still doing Covent Garden, and an interesting thing, I was doing solo shows.
I say Mum and Dad did Richard and Judy as well, didn't you?
Oh, yeah, we did This Morning and Pebble Mill and all the other things,
Cool stuff.
And is this all in the early 90s? Are you looking at 90, 91, 92 during this time?
Well, I'd say from 84 onwards, we did all sorts of them, we put ourselves in all sorts of positions, sometimes alone, sometimes the two of us, sometimes with other people, But it was quite interesting. It was a lovely
it was a big thing just
variety
to get exposure
TV
for juggling TV.
Which you don't get nowadays in the same way. You hardly get a juggler on, let alone a female juggler. I think there was less female jugglers in those days than males. But you did have more variety shows, like Paul Daniels had quite a lot of jugglers on his show, and the London Palladium and all those, they had more variety. Pardon?
Variety, isn't it interesting? The variety now, juggling as a component of variety, is seen as being archaic. And in the 80s and early 90s, it was just as archaic as it is now. But yet it wasn't seen like that. It was seen as something exciting and new.
Yeah. And funny enough, people still find it exciting when you do it. So I don't understand. It's to do with the media, I think, that, not inviting jugglers. And also to do with the programming, because they don't have as much variety show. And when they do, it doesn't tend to be like jugglers, magicians sometimes, and ventriloquists, which is great, but not so many jugglers. I don't know why.
It's strange, isn't it? Because if you look at YouTube
I know
videos,
loads of jugglers that juggle all over the world.
And then look at modern media. Look at the short form media, look at YouTube videos, and there's loads of stuff which is juggling, but it's not three clubs. It's throwing a fork into an apple and then the apple onto your head, or there's these other different kinds of tossing and object manipulation, which get multiple millions of views on YouTube. Incredibly popular pieces of short form media that would easily make short, very entertaining pieces within a TV format, and it's just not utilized.
That's right. I want to go on to, I just want to say, because besides, and there's clowning as well, and in 1992, I also met a Northern Irish juggler called Nolene, Tilly Breen, and she's now living with her Danish husband, and they hope to set up some circus there. And it seems like in Ireland, they still kept the variety that we haven't got so much here. I'm getting very scared for our variety, because it seems to be losing itself, and that would be a shame, for us all. So
well,
if you're out there,
got talent and nothing, don't you?
Well, there's talent.
Britain's Got Talent. Yeah, and there's the scene inside Britain's Got Talent is so generic. When you know so many amazing artists that do so many different tricks and skills, to not even see any of that represented, as you said, apart from short quick little tricks on YouTube, it's just so crazy. When you go to a BJC or a Renegade or even BJC or go see a gala show, it's just so intensely incredible and life-changing that, it's sad that the mass media haven't coined onto that, because it's amazing.
Well, the problem with Britain's Got Talent, I think, is that it's not art. They're not looking for art. They're looking for products, and the beauty of what we do when it's done well is that it bridges the gap from being variety to being art and then to being entertainment, and it triangulates between these three places. And Britain's Got Talent's not really looking for that.
Well, Simon Cowell has always been quite negative towards jugglers. He's always said he hated jugglers.
But his mum loves jugglers.
And then, but he's always not liked it. And Diablo kind of came into it a little bit because America's Got Talent had a good Diablo act as well. But I think it was Simon Cowell's hatred towards jugglers in general, which is really upset me for a long time, actually. Yeah, it had a big negative effect.
I just want to
say, Susie, on a different note, because me and you have discussed this, the issues you had being when you were doing solo, the issues you had of being a woman, and the problem, I think other women jugglers might like to hear this, the problems you had to face being a solo woman juggling, say, on the street, doing a street show.
Well, first of all, I was thinking about this even after we started talking about why would a woman do a solo juggling show on their own in the street? And I was thinking about kind of safety, but there's several issues. But first of all, I want to say, when I was doing those solo shows, I started off, I wasn't single parent at first. And then Matt's left. And then I ended up still doing solo shows on the street as a single parent.
Yeah, me and my brothers and sisters were on the side watching these shows as well. I remember a few times. Yeah.
But the first thing I want to say is I got heckled quite a lot. And I noticed I used to watch Rosie the clown. Rosie's another lady clown at the time, or juggler. She was a magician, actually, very well respected in the magic world. And she used to do shows, and she used to get heckled a lot. And it seems like in order to do shows as a woman on your own, you have to be pretty strong, because some of the heckles were quite nasty, but you had to not be oversensitive with them, because otherwise you'd never perform again. Similar situation to, that wonderful show that I did on TV, and it would put you off. So what you had to do is override the heckles or heckle back. And one thing I was good at was heckling back, but I was never nasty to my audience. I don't know what happened to me, but I heckled in a way that I wasn't nasty to them, but I shut them up. Because I think I was angry that they were heckling me in the first place. And they wouldn't heckle other shows in the same way. So I wasn't sure, and I'd love women to tell me, if there's women that are watching and they're performers, did you get heckled a lot? Or was it wasn't just Covent Garden. You used to get heckled in shopping centres.
It was quite a different tone of heckling as well, right?
Yeah.
It's mostly sexism and, of course, and discrimination and all that sort of stuff. Because there was a lot of heckling in shows in general, wasn't there? But, not to the degree of what, Mum used to get.
But
would they heckle you in a sense of, based upon your gender? It's not your crap. It
was all gender. It was gender focused a lot, wasn't it?
It's all
I was thinking.
Sexualized. That's what it was. Yeah.
I was thinking of the people that used to do shows. People like Romany, who now is the top magician, you know. Frankie Anderson used to do street shows. Rosie Tilly did street shows. But I also want to say, I think what helped me, I had strong women in my life. I came from a single parent family. I had my mother, who brought up 3 children, and my Auntie Mary, who was a single parent, and my sister Kathy, and Pinky, and Caroline Ainsley, people like that in my life. Wendy and Juggly Jane. Maureen Carter was really supportive of women jugglers, and she was connected to Zippos at one point as well. And there was Holly Stuttard, who's a younger generation that's come through, who's amazing. Jenny, Nola Ray, Freedom Turney, Violet Crick, all those people. There's a whole mix of women there and more. I mean, Aileen, you know, was a performer in her own right. And all of those were really strong women, or are strong women, that had a sense of who they were. And I think that helped them in their performance. It's hard to know, because when you're first setting up a show in Covent Garden and you're a woman, you've really got to focus on what you're actually wanting from your audience. Everyone has to, women or men, but I think for a woman, you have to work out what it is you can do that will get attention from both sexes, not just, you know, heckles. And one of the things I was talking to Melvin was, one of the things we used to do, which I used to do in my solo show, is I used to juggle knives over people. And we called it,
especially when they got too rowdy, right? So you get the rowdy people.
Well,
out
I would make a joke, but I'd bring my knives out and say, just watch it, you know, and stuff like that. And, you know, and then I'd do the walk of death, and I would choose the noises heckler as well to come out, and they quite often did come out, surprisingly. But I wondered why I did that, you know, why I used that kind of side of me to ridicule the person who was heckling. And Melvin, you had an explanation for that, didn't you?
I'm not sure I remember now, but I do remember.
What do you think then?
This story's about you, but I mean, we used to work together doing Crazy Waiters, and what we do towards the end of the evening, these big corporate shows, is we do little shows. So we do 3 little 10-minute shows, and usually involving something like Susie doing the walk of what we called the walk of death. Probably most other people have called the walk of death. Her juggling over someone, always a man. And what really amused me, we were both older. And I think there's some conception by men and women about older women. And it really did amuse me. It was almost to a person, they would think I was the one who was going to do the and it was always Susie that did the juggling. And that was so funny, is their conceptions looking at both of us, and me. I quite often be holding the knives, and I couldn't juggle the knives over someone.
The other thing, I used to wear a skirt, didn't I, because of the waitressing outfits, because you had to look like the waitresses. And of course, when I was doing the walk of death, why would I put a serviette over someone's eyes to stop them from seeing under my skirt? What's all that about? You know,
it was the great thing is that people were looking at me and Susie, and automatically their preconception was I was the one who was the man was going to be the juggler, not the woman.
But this leads into a question I had bubbling in the back of my mind from this, is this idea that, and it actually made me question it hearing this. There's this idea that when a woman walks out on stage, she has to address her womanhood, whereas a man goes on stage and addresses his character. It's not necessary for a man on stage to address the idea of a man and how a man is contextually involved in this environment, whereas a woman might have to. But the thing that makes me question that there is that Melvin, in that circumstance, his manliness was as much a part of that piece as your womanliness. The expectation was there in that. So it makes me question that. I don't know what you think about it.
But it's attitudes, isn't it? It's to do with attitudes. I mean, I told you earlier, me and Big Chris used to do gigs. They used to always go up to Big Chris and ask them, you know, what the organisation was. And it wasn't Chris that was doing that, it was me. But so it's definitely an attitude, but also the women have an attitude. Because, you know, I would never really choose a woman as my volunteer. I would always choose a bloke. What's that about?
Well, maybe
is it to get my own back or what?
Well, maybe it's not to take your own back, but maybe it's this specific dynamic, this expectation that's within the audience's mind. As soon as you bring anyone out, there's immediately a story and a relationship being conceived in the back of people's brains. They're contextualizing what you're looking at, right?
Yeah.
You're playing off conflict as well, right? It's an interesting thing.
And I also think in clowning we learn about, and this is where I wanted to come in, when I lost my confidence a second time due to ill health, because that's interesting too, and I wanted to go back and perform, I went to a workshop in Tuscany, and the workshop was behind the mask, and it was run by a lady called Sue Morrison, who does shaming clowning teaching. And she's got another one coming up, actually, which is keep an eye on Sue Morrison, because she's the most amazing teacher. The word I would use that maybe the audience are interested in is connection and vulnerability. And the connection between vulnerability of a woman and a man on stage in those circumstances. Then it made me realise, because when I went to Sue Morrison's workshop for 2 weeks, it was really intense, but I had to find myself again. I had to find because I lost it. I did a really good performance, half of it, with 3 master clown teachers, so to speak, in Ireland. And I blew it on the second bit. It was hard staging anyway, and I'd hurt my leg, but I disconnected. I was so nervous about the whole thing, I disconnected. So I had to find a connection again, because I totally lost my confidence again. And so going to this Tuscany workshop, which is probably quite drastic, was the best thing I'd ever done in my whole life. And something I should have done when I was younger as well, I would have loved to have done, because she has a series of 6 masks you go through. And then you do another performance, and I know you're a different person by the time you've done those 6 masks, because you're exploring your vulnerability, you're exploring your inside, you're getting to know yourself. And I love it. It was the most amazing workshop, and I blew all my savings on it so that I could go to it. And I was really pleased, because when I got back, I went to a theatre with some clowns. And I went on stage without any props. And I was able to face my demons. Because I don't know whether you get it, Melvin gets it and Alex gets it, but when you're performing sometimes, you can be really scared of your audience. And the thing you have to do is connect with them. And if you're too scared, you're going to disconnect and they won't connect, and then you don't have such a good show. Whereas Sue Morrison teaches you all sorts of little processes through her own techniques of connecting. I love it. And there's loads of other clown teachers that do things like this. And juggling teachers should use these connection skills just as much, because they're so important.
It's interesting that, because you said it was a mask workshop, and I know the interesting part from Philippe Gollier when he's teaching is to try and teach you not to have any masks.
Yeah.
To find your own humanity. That then means there is much higher chance that you communicate with the audience, that they relate to you. What do you think, Susie?
Absolutely. In fact, our masks we made blindfolded, and it was to do with the feel. It was after we'd done all the exercises. We still made the masks, but it was more to do with the feeling, the humanity part of it. We had to become children, little children, and really find ourselves as children, not just play at children, but be a child, you know. And it's difficult as well. Quite often we're in tears, you know, and bringing other people to tears who are the audience. But you can also play as well as part of your connection. And it's very hard to describe until you actually get into those situations with your audience as well. But I was so pleased that I was able to, you know, admit to myself that I needed to be vulnerable. I needed to face my demons, who weren't demons at all, as it turns out.
I suppose this is quite a difficult thing. I tend to play quite a low status character, and I came from quite a, came from a very kind of not impoverished, but low status, outside of society kind of position. So I felt like I needed to be very strong when I performed and not vulnerable. I had to be powerful. And I can imagine being undermined as a lady in an environment where people go past you and people are heckling you in a sexual and diminutive way, that can create a similar kind of thing, a need, a desire for a strong exterior, to be bulletproof, to be powerful. And that seems like what you're going through is the deconstruction of that.
Mm.
It's really interesting because you just made me think also, when you're talking about sexuality, I want to ask Alex a question, because he was a child when I was performing, and he's been an adult when I performed with him and stuff. I mean, how do you see, I mean, because you performed with the Flying Seagulls this year, didn't you, at Glastonbury? And I just want to know how you felt about your mum performing and if anyone heckled or whatever.
So I've seen Mum perform since before I remember. Like, Mum was always playing a very, very strong character, and she's a very strong person. Like, Mum's one of the strongest people I know, whilst having to be, you know, also one of the most vulnerable people I know as well, lots of different elements. But as a performer, Mum basically stood up and she was loud and held a crowd. And it's interesting because and
I'm still loud.
She is still loud, and she still heckles quite a lot. But anyway, but when Mum got ill, and when my mum and dad broke up as well, that's obviously a big state change in her as well. So to be honest with you, when she was getting heckled, she always used it to her advantage. So it was always like, I'm going to take this and turn it into either humour or turn this into part of the act. So hence her doing the knives or, you know, juggling over the person and creating that positivity. When Mum, you and Dad broke up, there again, it was a state change, and then she had to re-find herself rather than having Dad and Mum. Because when Mum and Dad performed, it was like my dad was the professional, still silly, but professional, and Mum was the clown doing the tricks. But actually,
they call it stooge.
Yeah, almost harder tricks, but obviously just being silly. And then Mum had to step up and be that stronger character, and you know the stooge as well. So she had a multi-layered way of performing. And then when Mum got ill, and Mum got quite seriously ill, it changed you quite dramatically. So what Melvin said regarding masks is quite interesting, because Mum had to wear all these masks and you know, de-layer all of that, and then actually work with nothing. So all of a sudden, I've seen Mum use juggling as a big part of her performance, as well as clowning. But she did loads of performances without any juggling or any clowning, just her being there as a person and then creating humor or sadness and so on and so on. So mum's basically done so much stuff and so many ways of performing that she's come through it, and now she's just funny, you know, without anything. There's no prop needed or no mask needed. It's just being her, or you know, very, very creative in lots of ways as well. So I think mum's done so much variety. It's been quite amazing to where she's come to now.
My son just said I was funny. Wow.
Yeah, but me and mum performed a lot. So since I was a kid, like from the age of 3 or probably 2 or 3 years old, I've been performing with mum. So when me and mum perform, it was quite interesting, isn't it? Because we automatically go into like what my mum and dad used to do. Because my whole life I've seen those routines. So it was maybe like a gap of 10 or 15 years, and we started performing again, together again. And it was just like, wow, I know all of these routines so well that it just worked. It was super, super lovely, wasn't it?
It's interesting though, because I always wondered.
Mum's also seen me do her routines about her, so that's interesting.
And I echoed them as well, so no, you're supposed to do it like that.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because when I see Steve Rawlins and Jay Rawlins, you know, they've passed on the routines, and that's what you do in circus. But what I find really interesting is what you said, Alex, about going into those old routines with you taking over your dad's bit, because Alex is an amazing juggler and I'm still a stooge, and it makes sense for us to do it like that. But for me, it's like a miracle as well. You know, my own son doing the routines that I used to do all those years ago, you know. it's just incredible, really. And I'm pleased that it carries on.
I mean, my brothers and sisters don't juggle, and I just love juggling, and I always have. I started juggling when I was 3 or 4 years old, started performing at the age of 5 or 6. And yeah, it was just so natural to perform together. And we still do performances together, right? So, yeah.
I've got a little saying here as a single parent performer when you're bringing up children. And you know the saying, behind every good man is a woman. Well, this one is, behind every good woman is another person. Because that's what's happened. I thought about, you know, when I split up and I still had the 4 children I was looking after, I was thinking, well, how did I manage to carry on? And I want to say thanks to all the people that gave me encouragement, and the people that helped me, like Big Chris and Alan and Melvin, you know, because without Melvin doing the wacky waitressing with me, I wouldn't have had any work. So it's good to think, you know, just because you're a parent, it doesn't mean to say you can't work.
And me and Mum performed at Melvin's wedding, right?
Yeah.
Juggled all over the bridesmaids and the bride as well. I think it was like 12 people that we passed.
In our ordinary civvies.
Yeah.
People didn't even know, did they, Melvin?
Should explain that they were. How many kids did you pass round?
I think it was 12. It might have been 12. It might have been 14. I can't remember. It was a lot. So
a long line of kids. Some people might not know what passing is, but maybe you explain that what's going on, because everybody understands that.
We each have 3 clubs each. I wish we could demonstrate, but our room is too small. But we each have 3 clubs each, and we have people in between.
We had the bride in the middle, and then all the kids in the outside of it as well. It's a great picture.
And we had a whole long line of children with the bride in the middle as well, which was Anna. And we were at either end, and we were throwing clubs, not at random. We were throwing them in a pattern so that we could catch them at each other. And we were passing clubs across all this line of children, which was one of the things so it wasn't just the walk of death. It was trying to get the children to keep still and make sure you didn't hit any of the children and upset the adults because of that. But so we used to do a little routine, like we used to go and was it the whoosh, whoosh, woo, Yeah, just to let the children know there was wind coming across.
And the first bit is doing the fake bit and scaring the shit out of everyone by shouting. But
I want to say, so support.
Basically, when I was a kid, Mum was doing her shows, and in the background we had our babysitters that
Big
were
Chris.
sometimes jugglers, sometimes these amazing artists, as well as just really solid people around us. So Mum was performing at Glastonbury, and I had my Auntie Mary to take us around at Glastonbury. I've been to 20 Glastonburys now. Mum was at the first Glastonbury, even before Glastonbury started, she was there as well.
I'm a hippie, that's why I think.
But yeah, that's the point though. Without those facilitators, Mum wouldn't have been able to do the performance, and and that was throughout pretty much my whole childhood from 8 years old.
I also juggle now. I also juggle, not only just juggle, but perform with my sister Lenora. We do stuff, and she plays amazing flute, and she busts on London Underground if you ever see her. And she does a harmonica, blues harmonica. But she also does magic. And if anyone can teach me magic successfully, I'll be very happy. So far, no one's succeeded. But I would love to learn some more magic. And I've got all the tricks, I just can't do them. But I do a few little things like rope tricks.
We should talk about, so Mum's in a really cool organisation called the Lady Ratlins.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. But I don't know if you know what the Lady Ratlins is.
Okay,
please
the granddaughter.
It's a very cool
thing. And I'm also in Clowns International and Equity. I'm still a union lady as well. But I'm in the Grand Order of Lady Ratlins, which is an organisation for performers, women performers, and it's kind of equivalent to Waters Rats. But the idea is to fundraise for charities, and we have several charities, and the charity that we do it for is mainly for children, and there's a lot of performers or performers' wives. So we have people like Paul Daniels' wife, Debbie, who's in her own right.
The wonderful Debbie McGee.
Yeah, and we have lots of different performers. Billy Roper, who used to be in circus and do the spinning the ropes and stuff. There's all sorts of people.
Very famous.
Vicky Michelle from Heidi High, and they're all. And at first, when I went into the organisation, I was like, but actually, they are.
Why were you like that? What was the thing that made you?
Because I thought they're all going to be really snobby and reject me and blah 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 blah, And actually, what happened was when I was here, I went into Brinsworth House, which is what the Royal Variety Show convalescent home, but it's also an older person's home now, nursing home. But I went there and I went into a room called the Lady Ratlins, and that's when I found out about the Lady Ratlins from Steve Clark from the Clark Brothers, who was a tap dancer. And he told me, and he said, well, I was telling him some of the things I've been doing, and he said, well, you should be there at the Lady Ratlins. And I was like, oh, I couldn't possibly. Anyway, I started talking to some of the circus people that were already in the Lady Ratlins, and they actually, you had to be recommended by someone in Lady Ratlins, and they recommended me to go in. And I, as I said, I was nervous. I thought they were all going to be snobby, but no, they're not like that at all. And they've done loads of fundraising for people like disabled children's horse riding and all sorts of things. Whatever you ask for,
so these are,
they will consider.
Mum is very humble, but these are people like my mum who are very famous variety artists from over the last 50 years that have been very influential in teaching and inspiring. And Mum's definitely justified her place there, of course.
And I'm inspired by them so much.
And and it works always. And they do some amazing work. And do some really cool
stuff. I'm
also
inspired by Clowns International. I'm inspired by people like Zippo, who's our president. He's really, he's got a passion for clowning. He's got a passion for circus.
Martin has brought up a lot of people. He's brought up so many people in the circus world and given so many people an opportunity with the Circus Academy he had for years and years and years. And he's put his whole life into it.
And water rats like Rick Waitman and I used to love.
Steve Rawlins.
I was quite surprised, but also Bobo Roberts and the circus people from. There's all sorts of people that you wouldn't even think of that are in that organisation,
Yeah, well, Bobo's here at the moment.
Yeah, but it's not Freemasons. It's about giving to charity, and and helping people to promote variety and
that's the big thing, is to promote variety.
Yeah,
supporting good causes and promoting variety at the same time.
Well, that's the idea. So it's totally different from what I thought it was going to be originally, until I talked to Steve Clark. So my life, I've got loads to say, but I'm not going to sit here and say it. But I do say that I feel quite proud. I would never change my life. I think I've gone through ups and downs, and I've had quite a few, as you know, bruises in my life. But I've made so many good friends, and circus has been, paramount in my life, which I never knew. When I was 5 years old watching Bertram Mills, I never thought that I would be involved in circus. Never occurred to me.
You're broadcasting still right now to this day. Am I right in thinking that?
Yeah, I've had a community radio station for 12 years now. And I was also in... Pardon?
It's in your house.
Yes. Over
COVID, she has a studio as well.
I've got an outside studio and also a home studio. And I broadcast radio with a team. It's not just me. There's Alan J. Cannon, who does all the station managing. And it's 24/7, and it's called Brighton Hove Community Radio. And I just won, and I feel very proud. I was nominated to Make a Difference Award this year, and BBC South, and they awarded me as a nominator for Make a Difference. They awarded me a plaque, which is lovely, and I feel very honoured. That I was also a COVID champion along with 5 of our presenters, because we were carrying on doing all our programs. I still do 2 programs with people that can't get out of their bedrooms, and I do it on the phone with them, which is amazing.
What I'd say, which is what you're answering the question now, but I wanted to say it anyway, and I feel like I'll push you to elaborate it a little bit. Why community radio? Why do a community radio project?
You should start with the Radio Reverb, right?
Yeah, I was actually going to change my career back in 2003. Yeah, I was always going to juggle, and I'm going to juggle for the rest of my life. That's said. In fact, my New Year's resolution is to juggle more. So, but in 2003, I wanted to change my career. I was looking for a job, and I went on this media course with the BBC, and it was a 6-month course, and I had to take exams and stuff, and it was quite tough. And I hated radio, I'll tell you, at the time. I had a very harsh radio teacher. But at the end of the course, I thought, what now? And I'd already sold a few interview recordings to the BBC at that point. But I didn't feel I was good enough, funny enough. And I thought, well, what now? And the teacher, the radio teacher, who was really harsh, said to me, well, there's always Radio Reverb or Festival Radio. And so the first thing I did was I was doing Festival Radio.
What's Festival
with the
Radio?
BBC. Every Brighton festival has a radio station that they run, and they interview people. And that's what I did to begin with.
So it was like snippets of the festival getting sold to BBC to give awareness to BBC Sussex of what the festivals were. Yeah. Mum was a roaming lady going around. Yeah, exactly.
I was the
reporter on the scene.
Yeah. And then also I was invited to go to Radio Avalon down in Glastonbury. And so I'd get up and do the breakfast show at 6 o'clock after having 1 hour's sleep. And but that was good, because I was actually interviewing performers that I really loved listening to anyway, and wanted to ask these burning questions, because as you know, Matt and Melvin and Alex, you can't stop me talking. So, but the one way you can is if I ask a question and I listen, because I am quite a good listener as well, believe it or not. So that's how I started. And then in 2010, I realised that I was carrying my radio presenter up the stairs because she was disabled. And I was talking to a man who's a rock singer who was actually involved with Hawkwind and all that lot from the Real Music Club called Judge Trev. And I was saying, God, this is hard work, you know. And he used to be a guest up there on our 5th floor studio. And I said, I can't do this any longer. And I got made redundant from my job that I was teaching at college. And with the redundancy money, I set up my own radio station that had disabled access that you didn't have to carry your presenter up the stairs with. And also it was live studio. And I've not stopped since.
So Radio Reverb were basically a community-based radio station.
And we had to make them FM.
Then they got into FM and they got rid of most of the community members. So Mum felt very upset by that. She obviously wanted to involve the community and then started off Brighton Hove Community Radio, which all involved community radio, community people running the radio, etc. And that was the big push, wasn't it?
Yeah, I also want to just go back. There's a few people that I would like to mention, which is Jude and Phil. I met Phil at East Finchley Workshop years and years ago. And Jude and Phil are media people, you know, funny enough, ironically, but also they were jugglers as well. And they're involved in the Glastonbury Festival and the Circus and Theatre Fields, doing videos and all sorts of things.
A lot of festivals, actually, don't they?
But they were also in Georgia, Tbilisi. So I can't not mention them. And Toby Philpott, who you've had on Incorrigible Rogues.
On Whining On. Yeah, he was on a couple
yeah,
of
he
ago,
worked for Oddballs. Yeah, he worked for Oddballs.
Yeah.
And he lived in my family home. He didn't mention that. But when I asked his address and he said 110 Stapleton Hall Road at the time, I went, but that's my family home. And he was living in there.
What a coincidence, eh?
I know. And most of our lives have been with coincidence, you know, like the Young Saturday. One of the aims of Oddballs is to give young people and older people like me work. Yeah. So, Alex, you can carry on. What's Oddballs doing now? Because we had Saturday workers who are jugglers as well, called the Dangerous Brothers, what are they called? Danger Boys.
Danger Boys, yeah.
Yeah, the Danger Boys.
We do the same thing. We sponsor a lot of young jugglers. I mean, for me, I have a really strong passion just to keep juggling going. You know, I want juggling to be in the UK nation, worldwide nation as well. But I feel very blessed because my mum goes to the British Juggling Convention with us. We go to the European Juggling Convention. We do a lot of the small juggling conventions as well. And we basically sponsor young jugglers and encourage them to either get support. Who's the latest one we've done with Street Reform?
The young girls, and also Harvey.
Harvey is really, really cool. He's a Covent Garden.
Yeah, we've got him at Covent Garden, yeah.
Did quite a few sessions with Harvey in Brighton, and Mum came along, gave like different tips and things as well as supporting with the juggling equipment, but just giving him, you know, time and effort and a voice, you know, within the community. Because Harvey's so cool, but there's a lot of great jugglers. There's Simeon, he's doing 10 balls. He did 10 balls at the BJC on stage.
And what about the girls?
Yeah, the girls from Fiery Jack. So all those lot as well. The three, they're amazing.
They're amazing jugglers.
But they're all our sponsored jugglers as well. So Harvey's sponsored.
Harvey has done a brilliant service in Covent Garden because he brings the average age down.
Massively. I mean, this is one of the problems. Yeah, this is one of the problems we've had in Covent Garden, and one of the things we're trying to look at now is getting younger, creative performers into Covent. It's become a place of middle-aged people to pay off their mortgages, which is, you know, there's nothing wrong with that, and there's a place for that, but it seems like in the early 80s, early 90s.
It wasn't like that when I was a kid. Yeah.
Lots of young, vibrant people coming from university and coming from the City Lit and coming and doing creative, interesting stuff. And wouldn't it be wonderful to have some of that, at least in a small way, back and infused in the area?
So what do you think it needs besides money as well, and also enthusiasm from the authorities?
Well, after doing 117 of these interviews and most of them being situated around this time frame, I think that there's a couple of things. So when you were beginning, you were living in empty buildings. When I began, I lived in empty buildings. When a lot of people began, they had benefits or they had cheaper rent. The City Lit was there offering cheap, free, accessible, or almost free, accessible education on performance. All of those things are not there anymore. So all those performance subsidies are gone. At the same time as that, the rent pressure on the performers that are there at the moment has pushed and created a need for a reliable formula to make money at the end of a show. And that also slowly changes the way the viewers, the way the audiences watch the shows there. They see it more as a boxed off experience. Right, I've seen that. I've done my, my roller coaster ride that is a Covent Garden Street show. Right, move on to the next thing, rather than being situated in the place to watch culture and to see different interesting stuff. So what to do about it is incredibly complicated, and it's a long journey. I think getting cultural things back there, things that are diverse, getting television presence there again, getting some kind of media presence, having competitions, having festivals there would help to start re-establishing the idea of that space as being a cultural space, as opposed to a space where you watch
I think that's where Alternative Arts was doing the right thing. They used to encourage a lot of festivals. I know that a lot of performers moaned because they didn't get as many shows in, and it was their living.
It should be the circus schools that should be like, there should be a bigger connection with circus schools and the street performing. One of the things I hear a lot from young performers, at least, is it's so hard to get a space at Covent Garden and actually be able to get a chance to perform. Obviously, if you want to do it, you will make it happen. But there seems to be a little bit of a disconnect between the circus schools and the street performers, which there didn't used to be. There used to be more of a connection between those.
It's two-tier. So the difficulty for those people to get a space there is not accidental. I think it's something that's in some way by design historically, is people trying to make it slightly difficult to access in some way so that they keep the list small, which I don't agree with necessarily. And I think the other thing is that there's an idea in the circus schools, I think, of circus being high status, which I don't think it was there before. And there's an idea of street performing being very low status.
Yeah.
And so I think people don't get that sense of validity by going and doing their performance on the street, especially when they begin, where they're going to die on their arse taking a stage
I think that could change.
Street,
I think that could change, because one of the things, there's not enough venues now. There used to be Camden Lot, there used to be the South Bank, there used to be all sorts of different places if you couldn't get a place in Covent Garden. Yeah. So I think it's a matter of getting more places to perform. And also, so I remember access. Sometimes it's sheer determination, because I remember getting up and being at Covent Garden at 6 o'clock to sign on with a pram and a child in the pram to get my spot to do a show later when your name was pulled out of the hat at the time, that they allocated. And that was really difficult for people like me who had a child.
Difficult by design.
Yeah, by design. So that, I don't know what the situation is now. It might be good to tell
9:30. 9:30 now.
Oh, that's a bit more humane.
Put your name in, yeah.
But
yeah.
What do you say if young people can't get a spot? Because don't they have to audition now and stuff?
So it's in flux at the moment. Generally speaking, and this is the chicken and egg thing, is you have to have a working 40-minute show and you have to have liability insurance. Now, the working 40-minute show, I think it comes from this idea that people could work in the rest of Westminster and the South Bank and everywhere else and develop a show and then bring it to Covent Garden. And Covent Garden was treated through the 90s and 2000s as this kind of premium space. You go there when you've got a working show. Learn on the side pitches.
Well, it's interesting that, Max, because when I was at Camden Lock, me and Max worked with John Hegley, and he at the time was in the Popticians, but he used to busk as well at Camden Lock. It was just before they took the site away, yeah. So we decided to work together, And I think that us doing our show and him doing his bit within a show was a really interesting experience. For us, we were, we were all very young and gaining experience by doing it. Well, because I'd never worked with a poet before, John with the glasses on, and it was a really quite a unique show. Working,
this is one of the problems, sorry to interrupt you, but I want to emphasize this point here is that the way the systems are developed to have everybody with their time, and there's only enough time for this and this and this. Very rarely do you get people touching base with each other and cross-pollinating, the musicians playing with the jugglers playing with the dancers. Very rarely do you get that anymore. It's become atomized.
And that's where alternative arts came in. That's where alternative arts came in, because they used to get the musicians working with a different variety of artists and performers, dancers and stuff, and have events that made them a big excuse for it.
Just to quickly talk about the circus school thing, because Sean Gandini was performing in Covent Garden. Mum's told me the stories when he was a kid there. So it definitely is a space where you can prove yourself and become a theatre juggler or, quite, that innovator. Other side. Yeah, absolutely. But it does start from, maybe a good part of it is the street, because it's people and it's theatre and it's real life. So it's definitely a platform you can utilise as being in a circus school or being a young juggler as well. And as Mum said, if you want it, you'll get it. You keep working towards it, and obviously there's a few people you can touch base with to help you out to get there. But Harvey's a really good inspiration as well, because he's a young little dude and he does this thing.
No, he's really great. But on the other side, from what Matt's been saying, on the positive side, there really was. Harvey came along. I think one or two people from the Covent Garden community of performers tried to help him fit in, and then made space for him in the indoor pitch so he could grow on the indoor pitch and then maybe move to the outdoor pitch. And he's worked on the outdoor pitch a few times. So there is, somewhere along the line, if more young people would come, there is a willingness just to help some young people get in and get involved. That's one point. The second point is I don't feel that Circus Space makes any effort to link with street performance. I think maybe there's a snobbishness there or whatever.
They did have it as part of a syllabus at one point, right? Street performance was an element.
That's what I heard as well. It's called the National Arts of Circus Centre now too. Circus Space is old school.
What?
National Arts of Circus Centre. But yeah, I believe that maybe there should be some outreach between the two. As well as Circa Media as well, because there's so much footfall of interested people that are so talented and inspiring.
We'd love it. I mean, me and Matt for sure. And but even to try and contact this national whatever centre is,
the National Centre for Circus Arts.
Well, when you think,
go on, Susie, it's your show.
When you think that's when you think back when Circus Space was first formed. And it was all of us jugglers and Charlie Hollands and Ollie and
just around the corner from
and Lindsay Quabano and people, and we all helped to keep it running because it was in a very rundown building, and Harry, who did all the plumbing and electrics. But the thing is, when it went to Old Street, it started to change, and they started to forget the roots really. Which is sad, because I remember them inviting people, but they hardly ever invited any of the jugglers who'd actually, helped to keep the Circus Space going. But it might be worth talking with Charlie Hollins, because he was a street entertainer with me and Max. He used to go out, and we used to go to all the pubs around Hampstead and busk. He has got a busking background, and a lot of the people that teach still have busking backgrounds.
They do, yeah. I know the guys as well, so we should hook up.
And people like Barry and Joan Grantham, who did the eccentric dancing. We need more of that in there. We need a bit of, and that might encourage some of the women. Because I was going to sing you a song, which was, "Where have all the women gone?" Can you give me an answer to that in Covent Garden? Is there many women performers nowadays?
None, I think.
That's a disaster area.
It's there was 3 or 4 ladies working there at one point, and most of them have retired, moved on to other things. We're all, generally speaking, a grizzled old bunch of middle-aged men now.
Well, I don't feel very grizzled.
Area.
What?
It's a disaster area.
Well, that's a shame because I don't feel very grizzled. And I remember Patricia Martinelli doing her dancing there, beautiful dancing, and lots of women coming in at one point. And maybe if you have that link, you might get some of the enthusiastic young girls back again as well.
There's a lot of them.
Like I was, and like Rosie was, and people.
I think it'd be to a benefit of the space, but then I also think that there has to be a flexibility developed in the space where we'd be opening up extra areas. And there's all I've got lots of different ideas about how you could make the place work better in the long term.
It might
Susie,
be. I will stop, but it might be interesting getting in contact with Andre as well, because he did that workshop back in 1988 to do with presentation and stuff. And he was very encouraging, and he used to come in and work with all the students and stuff. And he has a lot of connections and well respected in the TV world as well. So it might be good to talk to Andre Vincent and ask him, is there any way that you could collaborate with Charlie Hollins and get some street entertainers, young street entertainers from the circus schools into Covent Garden?
Well, we did a bunch of charity events like for Ukraine last year.
Yes, I loved it.
I would have loved to have had some of the things that we don't normally have in Covent Garden from the circus schools.
Yeah.
It was possible to set up big things.
Yeah.
And we got none of that.
Right. Well, there's something to ask for.
Well, something for the future as well. I'd like to believe that I have a reasonably good understanding of the mechanisms and the strategies and the way shows work. And I know a few of the people in Covent Garden who do. And I think people will be more than happy to give pointers and help develop pieces of work to make them viable street performances, in terms of building the crowd, show structure, finale structure, the differences in dynamics between performance on a stage and on the street, asking for something from the crowd and then giving them a reward, as opposed to the opposite, which you have on stage. Guys, we've gone over 2 hours, so can we make these last
I'd like to say thank you. I'd like to say thank you for inviting us on, and I hope that we haven't been too boring.
Susie, pleasure.
I know that you guys are a captured audience, but I think that's what we have to work on, how to capture the circus world into actually experimenting in the street, because the theatre is your stage. The street is your stage. So that's all I can say. And good luck to all the women out there. Get for it. Go for it. Do it. Even once in your life.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Susie, Alex, thank you for your time. Been a real pleasure talking with you. Really has. Mel, thanks for joining in. It's been great to have you co-hosting on the interview today. Everybody out there, thank you for watching, guys. Been an absolute joy to have this conversation with all of you. Have a lovely evening. Catch you the next time. Bye for now, everybody.